So, how old were you when the Hungarian Revolution started?
I was 18, just out of high school.
And what made you leave?
It's a long story. Well, maybe I can start with, what was the situation in Hungary. There was no religious freedom. Going to church, we had to do it at night in the darkness, so people won't see us, people who could report us to the authorities. The day before I left, I was playing the organ at the church at night, and I decided at the end of the Mass that I'm going to just play the Hungarian anthem. Hungarian anthem was not heard during the communist regime because they just didn't allow it. So I just turned on the organ pipes as loud as I could, and I played it, and everybody downstairs, they were singing and crying, and afterwards when I went outside, we met outside in the dark, they came and they hugged me and thanked me, and I was a hero. This was like on a Friday, and then Sunday morning, my cousin came over to play the piano. We played four-handed piano, and his mother ran over and he said, honey, there's a friend of yours from Budapest here who wants to see you because he wants to leave the country and escape to Austria. His sister, Andy's sister, was a war bride. He came to the United States in 1945. He married an American soldier, and she lived in America. And so Andy wanted to come to the United States. So when my cousin's mom was my godmother, and she said that who was here, I was just nervous. Andy. I mean, I see pictures of him on my cousin's yearbook. They were schoolmates. They were 5 years older than I am, and I had such a crush on him. And I wanted to meet him, but he was working in Budapest, and there was no way that I could, meet him. So this was my only opportunity. So I said, okay, why don't you go home, and then I'll wait like 5-10 minutes, and then I'll bring something that you accidentally left behind, and bring it over, and that's where I could meet him. So I met him, and oh my goodness, 6'4", good-looking guy, as you can see his picture. And my cousin didn't want to leave. He was in the army, and when you are in the army, they take all your IDs away. And if somebody would stop you, because they had checkpoints all over Hungary, if they stopped you and you didn't have an ID with you, then you could be arrested. So he said, I don't want to risk that, I don't want to go. So at that time, because of all the fighting in Budapest and all the injuries and dying, there were a lot of Austrian Red Cross trucks that were bringing blood from Vienna to Budapest, and they were going back and forth, and Andy was asking me if I could show them the highway where these trucks were going back and forth between Vienna and Budapest, because he was going to hitchhike to his town, which was the next town where his parents lived, because he wanted to say goodbye to them. And so he said, could you show me, because he has never been in our town before, and he said, can you show me how to get to that highway? And I said, sure, I'll show you. So while we were walking up, he kept saying, oh, Marika, since your cousin didn't want to come, maybe you would like to come. And I thought, so I went, we got up to that highway, and he was able to stop a Red Cross, I don't know what you call them, vehicle. And he said, just before we said goodbye, he said, well, if you decide to come meet us in front of this glass blowing factory, which was in their town, at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, I don't remember now, in the morning. So they left, and I went home, and I was just, what shall I do, what shall I do? I was so nervous. I'd never been away from home. I couldn't tell my parents because they would never hear of it. I had a 8-year-old brother. He was 10 years younger than I am. And I thought, what am I going to do? So I was embroidering. I was working on a pillow embroidering, and my mind was going 100 miles a minute. Well, by the morning, I decided I'm just going to go. Now, there was a food shortage in Hungary because much of the food was sent out to Russia, and some of the leftover food was, we had so many soldiers stationed, Russian soldiers, that they had to feed them. So there was a food shortage, so we had to get up really early in the morning and stand in line front of the grocery store. So you will be able to get milk and bread and oil and whatever. So I had this little oil can, and I got up early and walked to the store and walked right by the store and just kept walking and walking towards this town, which was about an hour walking away. And I got there just a little bit before the two boys, and they weren't there yet, and I thought, oh, they probably left without me. Well, they showed up, and you should have seen the shocked look on their face. I didn't think they thought that I'm going to go, so they were just kind of, what did we get ourselves into? So if you were caught, first of all, you would be taken prisoner, and you almost wanted to be shot rather than taken prisoner, because what happened in Hungary when somebody did, especially something like this, escaping the country, they take you to this AVO, A-V-O, that's the Hungarian secret police, quarters in Budapest, and in the basement, that's when they interrogated all these prisoners. And some of the people who were, it's on Andrássy út, it's a beautiful, beautiful avenue, and some of the people we heard from saying that when they were walking on the sidewalk outside, they could hear all the screams down from the basement while these prisoners were interrogated. So you didn't want to be caught. And sometimes people disappeared, family members all of a sudden didn't come home from work, and maybe a week later or 2 weeks later they got their bloody clothing in the mail because they did something or said something, and that was against the government. I mean, we couldn't, my father used to listen to Radio Free Europe, and we had to put towels and blankets around the windows and the doors, so if somebody walked outside, they couldn't hear that we were listening to the radio. Yeah, and you couldn't trust anybody. You didn't know if your neighbor or a friend, who would turn you in. It was just awful. Yeah.
Was your father part of the Communist Party?
No. Kids have to join the the Communist Youth Organization. We had to wear this little red scarf thing. And adults had to belong to the Communist Party. And my father and many other of his friends, they didn't join, so they were demoted. They either lost their job or they were demoted in their job because they wouldn't, and that's, his whole life. He was doing some menial job because he refused to. I'm surprised they didn't lock him up.
So what was your experience when you ran away?
First of all, the walking. I mean, I had some new boots that I just got for Christmas. It was just before, in November, before Christmas, and they bought me these beautiful boots, my parents, and so it was new. And walking with these new boots, by the time we got to the border, there was no skin on my heel. I mean, it was awful, and all of my toes, big toes, had to be removed when I got to the United States because it was all messed up. So we walked and walked, and we couldn't walk on all the roads that he marked in that map because there were checkpoints, and if you saw a bunch of motorcyclists, a bunch of guys we knew that was the secret police. So we had to go through vineyards and fields and just stay away from highways. And we walked through these little towns, and the closer you got to the border, the more you saw more and more people going in the same direction. Afterwards, I read somewhere that 200,000 Hungarians left the country at the time. And some went to Yugoslavia, I think, and the rest came to the United States. And so we were going through these small towns, and people, when they saw us, people who lived there, they would come out and bring you food because they knew that they couldn't leave, but they wanted to help us. So we didn't have to carry any food, we were just fed all the way. And the first night we spent in a little peasant family's house, and they gave us breakfast, and And then next morning again we walked, and sometimes we were picked up by a horse-drawn carriage so we could rest our feet a little bit. And one time an off-duty fire truck picked us up and drove us several miles, so that helped a lot. And then sometimes we had to go over rivers, and we always found somebody, some fisherman who would take us over in his little boat. And so by the time we got to the last town before the border, it was getting dark, and there were maybe like 30 of us, 30 people that came together. And we were debating, what should we do? Should we wait, spend the night here and start up tomorrow morning again, or just leave during the night, cover of darkness? So 15 of us decided we just want to go on, and in the dark. And they were collecting. We were trying to find somebody who would lead us. So they took all the money that we had. We didn't have a lot of money. We tried to ask somebody that, would you take us for that much money? Nobody wanted to do it because it was like a suicide mission. So we started up, and since Andy worked for the Hungarian water department, he knew all the canals and irrigation ditches and rivers that were in that area and all the swamps. So he decided, looking at that map, that the best way to go is to find this irrigation canal, which ran a little bit parallel to the border and then crossed over to Austria. So that's what we decided to do, and it was like, it was in November, it was cold and icy, and we were walking on the bank of this canal, or the irrigation ditch, and it was slippery, and there were some mothers who had babies with them, and they were afraid that the babies would cry in the middle of the night, so they put poppy seed in handkerchiefs and let the babies suck on it, because opium is made out of opium poppy, and it made them sleepy so they wouldn't cry out in the, So we were walking home probably for like 2 hours. It must have been close to midnight, when all of a sudden there was all this yelling and halt, halt, and flashlights and a bunch of soldiers. And right at that point, on the right side of the canal, there was a little forest, and there was a swampy area. So we started running down because we knew that we ran into a trap. We found out later that a lot of people crossed over there, and they got, they heard about it, so they thought that's the best place to kill the people. So we ran into the swamp, and it was like up to your chest. And we're running, trying to run, and that's when I lost Andy. I held onto somebody's hand, and I thought it was Andy, and he was pulling me up out of the water. And somehow we made it through the swamp and back up to the bank, and we kept running, and at the same time we could see these red flares. The Austrians were shooting up red flares. That's their color, the Austrian colors. So we knew which way we had to go, and that helped a lot. So we knew how close we were to the border, and finally, we knew we were at the border because there was a little mound of dirt, and there was an Austrian flag flying in there, and people just kneeled down and kissed the soil, and they were crying, and we were so happy, but Andy wasn't there. And I was so worried that he might have been killed, because there were a lot of, many of the people were killed in there.